Hey guys, welcome to Canadian Cutting Edge, and today we're taking a look at this folder by Stedemon knives. This is the BP-02. This BP model comes in 7 different color combinations. Most of them have all satin blades, and then you've got a choice of a variety of G10 colors. It's a knife with a pocket clip that is designed for one side, but you can make it work on both sides if you really want to, without much effort. And it's a straight back blade, which I don't have very many of. So yeah, you put a straight line across the back here, and yeah, it's nice and even. Saber grind, it's a high flat grind, and it's a thumb stud knife instead of a flipper knife. So there's a few unique things about this thing. 440C steel, if you're interested at all. Even if you're not interested, I think you should watch this. Of course I think that, it's my channel. So stick around and take a good gander at this knife. Full review coming at you right now. The first thing that we're going to look at is the side here that's got the working stuff. You've got the pocket clip. And on the pocket clip, it says Stedemon knives, or Stedemon. I'm not sure how that's supposed to be pronounced. With all the different lights and stuff, it's a little hard to see with a little bit of glare. So the letters there are not that hard to see. It's actually nice and black lettering when you see it in person. Not too thick. I don't prefer having a name on the pocket clip because when this is in your pocket, that part shows. So not terribly preferred, but it's not bad. You've got 2 body screws here and here on each side, but those are not assembly screws. They simply hold the handle scales on, and I'll show you more about that a little bit later. There's a little bit of jimping right here on the belly of the handle. Well, it's a flat belly, but they got some jimping there to give you a little bit better grip when you're holding the knife, and it does help. But interestingly, no jimping up here on the spine of the blade or the handle. Kind of weird. We've got some unique thumb studs right there. They actually look fairly thin and long in person, although in the pictures they look a little bit more stubby than they really are. They actually stand out beyond the handle scales, but not beyond these screws. So these screws stick out just a little bit, and so that is almost exactly in line with the screws. So it doesn't stick out farther than other parts of the knife do. So that's a good thing. There's a little bit of a divot in the top of the thumb stud. Very easy to deploy the blade. It feels a little odd because you're pushing on this small little top part, but once you get used to it, it's very, very easy to deploy this blade. With either hand, it just works very well. I'm looking at an LCD instead of my hand, and that's why it seems a little odd when I'm doing it on camera. Because usually you're looking at your hands when you're doing stuff like this, but I'm looking at a picture of my hands. So there's that. The blade is black stonewashed, and it's done quite well. It's got an even sort of stonewash effect all the way across. Saber grind, which is a flat grind that doesn't come all the way to the spine. A swedge up here on the spine on both sides of the blade, of course, keep it symmetrical. It stays full thickness all the way until right about there, and then it starts tapering down to the tip. Fairly thick at the tip. So there you can see a little bit about how thick it is at near the tip. And then the grinding. The grind on this knife is done, well, I'm an honest YouTuber, right? Terribly. The grind is done terribly on this knife. The angle that they did the final grinding at is so variable. It's very different here on the belly of the blade than it is right here, than it is right here. And the same thing is true on the other side. This side's not quite, well, maybe it's worse. On this side, it's very shallow here compared to the rest of the knife. right there, it's around 22.6 degrees. And on this side, it's actually the worst. It's more like 33 degrees, 34 degrees. It's just nasty. And I'll talk more about this later on. It needs to be, they sharpened it well. It is sharp. It came sharp from the factory, but it's a terribly variable grind. And so it's going to need a little bit of work. Thankfully, it's fairly thin behind the grind, so it's not going to take an awful lot of work, but it needs some work to become evenly ground all the way along. It's got a tiny little bit of a guard here. That's hidden all the way in the blade here, in the handle, I should say. So there's no flipper tab. It's only the thumb stud. Stop pin's right at the front, and it catches on right there on the blade. Stop pin's a good stop pin. It's, oh, I don't have the measurement. I'll tell you how thick that stop pin is. I often don't say the stop pin measurement. Sometimes I think some people might ask about it, and so I mention it every once in a while. We've got not much of, well, it behaves a little bit like a guard. You've got not much of a choil here for your finger. So when you're holding the knife, it's not a whole lot smaller here than it is here. Not like a lot of knives. It's got a nice rest area, but it provides a good amount of grip. I just wish they would have done a little bit more here to make it feel a little bit more secure. It's not bad. It's not terrible at all. I'm being a little bit nitpicky that way. They did something kind of odd. Check this out. There's one little jimp right there on the liner release. One. Three would have been nice, and a little bit more aggressive, so that'd be a little bit easier to grab. As you can see, that liner steel doesn't stick out that much further than the handle on this side. So when I first got it, I sometimes missed when I was trying to unlock the knife. I would just slide over it. It took a little bit of learning, a little bit of muscle memory to develop until I could consistently unlock the knife when I wanted to, just because, you know, there's not a lot of traction there on that liner lock, and it doesn't sit very proud. So that's one of the cons. The jimping here on the belly is actually done very well, and I do like it. The handle, I really like the G10 handle here. It's done very, very well. It's got that little bit of a cupped out space in here. So if you run your finger in this way, it sort of rests inside a little bit of a bed for your finger, you know, because it's rounded out like that. A little bit like the Ganzo FH11 in G10 has this cupped out space here. It actually helps an awful lot with grip. Your hand comes around and your fingertips, some of them, at least two of them, fit sort of in there, and it just helps give a lot of security. The carbon fiber version of that Ganzo is totally flat. So the carbon fiber laminate is smooth and flat. So if you did end up getting the carbon fiber one and you just found that it wasn't very, it didn't feel secure in your hand, kind of like Kevin Cleary reviewed one of those, the G10 version is much, much better. It's like holding a different knife almost. Anyhow, we're talking about this knife. And then they've got the chamfering here on the sides on an angle, both here on the belly and on the spine. That's really nice. A little bit of traction that it adds there. We've got a back spacer, and that they've sort of cut away the edges of, and so it looks almost like a floating back spacer. Not quite, but it sort of has that kind of effect. Great big hole back here for the lanyard. G10 back here, you know, you can tie anything you want on there. It's done very, very well. Lots of room for tying down. And then just a tiny little bit of a bigger spot here to give sort of like a back bolster. Ever so super tiny, but it does actually help a little bit. So there you go. That's pretty much the outside of the knife. Let's talk a little bit more about the pocket clip. It is a deep carry pocket clip. When you look at it like this, you're going, oh, wow, that thing's going to, the knife handle is going to stick out of the pocket tremendously. But it doesn't. It's only about ½ of an inch, about 1 1/4 centimeters that it sticks out of your pocket. Not bad at all. Let me show you. So there it is. Goes into the pocket very well, slides all the way in to the end of that, and then there you go. So not bad at all. Now it's time to take this knife apart and show you what it looks like on the inside. When I got my knife, it had a little bit of blade play side to side, and so I tried to tighten that up, but it was tight. I didn't want to wreck it or anything, so I decided, well, I got to take the shots of taking it apart anyways, so I took it apart, and this is what I found. Well, I don't actually have to take it apart to show you the inside, because there you go, that's the inside. A little bit of skeletonizing on that side, liner lock, a little bit more skeletonizing on that side, and it's a captured pin, even though there's a torque screw here. You adjust that one to tighten up if you've got any blade play. So if you do have blade play and you're screwing on these screws here, like, I mean, you're just going to town tightening these guys up, you're just going to mess up this screw and you're going to do nothing for your blade play, because that's down there. This knife had very slight blade play from the factory, but now it's got none, and now the blade centering is perfect. It just took a tiny bit of tightening up, and this is one of the easiest knives to change the handle scales on. That is, if you could find other handle scales. I've got no idea if they'll sell them separately or not. I doubt it. But so there you go. That's how this knife comes apart and goes back together again. So there you go. That's why I couldn't adjust the pivot pin here, because the screws are inside here. So the pivot point is quite a bit forward of this screw. And that's why you can see this line here, just like on the last knife that I reviewed. There's the detent slides across the face of the ricasso here on the blade, and it leaves a little bit of a mark. Let's zoom in again. But since it is a blackwash knife, that mark is not as obvious as on some knives. And on this video, it looks very obvious, but to the naked eye, it's not that obvious at all. It's very well hidden. You can just see the edge of the detent hole on the blade there. So I would like more of that hidden, but hey, it is what it is, and I report on what I see, not on what I want to see. Now it's time for me to tell you all of the dimensions and all the weights and everything. So we'll do that. The weight of this knife is 104 grams, 3.65 ounces. So it's very light for what you get, thanks in large part to that skeletonizing. The factory sharpness of this poorly ground edge is actually quite good. 220 grams of pressure to cut through the monofilament. So that's good. The cutting edge length is 9.1 centimeters, 3.58 inches. The blade length, so tip to the closest spot of the liner right there, 8.71 centimeters, 3.43 inches. The blade thickness is 3.7 millimeters, that's 0.146 inches. The blade depth, up an inch, that's where I measured. That's where I usually measure unless I say otherwise. 2.31 centimeters, that's 0.91 of an inch. The thickness of this edge behind the grind is 0.56 millimeters. That's 0.022. So it's a tiny bit thicker than I like some knives, but with 440C, I wouldn't want to go less than half a millimeter anyways. So that's good. The grind angle. Now we get to these numbers. Let me give you these numbers. Oh, these numbers. An inch down, 26.4 degrees, 29.1 degrees. Over here at the blade belly, the belly of the blade, 22.6 degrees. And where's my notes? Yeah, 34.4. So I said it was in the 30s before, 34.4 degrees, that angle there. So it's very variable, 34.4 to 29.1. And then this side, 26.4, 22.6. A lot of variability. I'm going to sharpen this knife as soon as this video is over. I still have to decide what angle I'm going to sharpen it at. It'll probably be 25 degrees per side. Get it all evened out at 25, and then we'll go from there. So not that great on the angles. Whoever they hired to sharpen these knives is doing a terrible job. If there's anybody from Stedemon Knives watching, you really got to get this sorted out at your factory. Time for the handle information. Handle length, 11.1 centimeters, 4.37 inches. The grip area in here is 9.7 centimeters, 3.8 inches. The handle thickness, not counting the pocket clip and not counting these screws, because the screws do stick out just a little bit. 1.32 centimeters, that's 0.52 of an inch. The handle depth, that's this way, it's largest right here, 2.38 centimeters, that's 0.936 of an inch. Not bad. About 15/16, almost exactly. And then when the knife is closed, it's quite a bit more. We're talking 2.77 centimeters, 1.09 inches. And the last measurement that we have here is the full length of the knife with the blade deployed, which is 19.8 centimeters, 7.79 inches, so almost 8 inches long. Not bad at all. I didn't mention earlier, and I was almost going to forget that. A lot of you guys want to know this. Whoop, where are we? There we go. The balance point, get the whole thing on the screen here. Right there, just a little bit on the back side of the choil there. Not bad at all. Really good balance point. How much does this knife cost? Well, from White Mountain Knives, you can get it for $37.99. So what's unique about this knife? Well, there's a couple things that are a little bit unique. When the handle scales screw on at different spots than the liners connect, you know, that's not that super common, but Stedemon seems to like to do that. And the way they did this cutout here for the pocket clip, well, that's not super common either, but Stedemon's done that before as well. This pocket clip, it's especially milled for this spot on this side, but you can make it work on the left side. Notice anything different? Yeah, the pocket clip only goes on this side right there. You see that extra milling out for the pocket clip? You don't have that on this side. Could you put it on this side? Yes. So you could put it on the left side if you want to. It's just not going to work optimally. But if your screw's long enough, that is these screws, and they are not that long, but if you can get it, if you can get one that's long enough, or you can get it to tighten up far enough, a few threads, you could put the pocket clip on the other side. I just don't recommend it, even though I'm left-handed. So if you're left-handed and you really want to make this thing work in your left hand, you can. It will have a little bit of play side to side, potentially on the left-hand side, because the G10 isn't milled out exactly the same in behind the screw on this side than it is on that side. I really think they could have done that. They could have done it behind this screw. I wish they would have made it exactly the same on both sides. It really would have been easy for them to do, and it wouldn't make it so super obvious that you can put the thumb stud on that side, a pocket clip. They just should have done that. Too many people are ignoring, you know, that 10% of people that are left-handed. We've got this lanyard hole. That's a little bit unique. And yeah, that's about it for unique factors. The thumb stud's a little bit, maybe slightly unique. It's a little bit odd the way that thumb stud sticks out there like that. Not a problem at all. Pros and cons. I really like, I mentioned it before, the way the handle scales are scalloped out like that, have this little scoop in there. That's a really good thing for the hand coming around like that. The lanyard hole is really nice because of a couple things. It's big enough for any kind of paracord, and it is inset. So when you do tie paracord on here, it doesn't stick out proud of the outside of the handles. So I like it being narrow this way, and I like that the hole's very good, and I like that it's at the very back of the knife. So other good pros on this knife, solid lockup. No blade play side to side, up and down since I adjusted it. The lockup point is perfect. The blade centering is very good. Not quite perfect, but very good. So yeah, it's excellent lockup. Now that screw that they have, the pivot screw in here, it was coming loose a little bit with use, and so I did use my VC3 Thread Mate liquid on there. And then it stopped coming loose on me. So that's a really good thing. But from the factory, if you don't have a product like ThreadMate VC3 by Vibratite, you might just want to use some very weak thread locker to keep that screw from backing out. that pivot screw that's inside there. And I very much like this blade, just basic design. I really like, this high saber grind. I really like flat grinds even more, but it's a high saber grind. That's nice. And this straight back, nice big belly. It's a very appealing blade design. It cuts very well, very functional, very useful. It's just designed very, very well. The cons. The detent is not very strong. It's a little bit too soft. Let's see, and you can see this. It looks like it's pulling in, but you don't hear anything of a thunk. It's not terribly soft, but it's a little bit too soft. And there's no adjustment that I can do to make it harder that I know of. The only thing I could do is try to make the spring stronger to push that way. That's a little bit risky sometimes. The detent is fully engaged with the hole, so there's no adjustment that I can do that way. They should have made this pocket clip right and left, especially when it was so close to, being done already. Very little bit more work to do that. Two other things. The liner release, I mentioned that earlier. I wish that, they would cut out this choil here on this side just a little bit deeper so that when your thumb gets over to that liner release, it's a little bit easier to get at. Or make that just a little bit more aggressive right here with some jimping or something to get your thumb in there. And the very last thing is something I mentioned, as I said on the previous video. I'm not a big fan of being able to see the detent line, but that's super nitpicky, especially on this knife with the black wash hiding it very, very well. So there's the knife, the pros and the cons, all the things about it. If you have any questions or comments, actually, I haven't told you anything, say anything. This is 440C steel on this knife. And I'll put it in the text at the beginning of the video, so you would have seen it on the screen if you were watching. If you're just listening, you wouldn't have heard anything until now. 440C is a decent budget steel, relatively good. I like it. No problem with it that way. For the price point of this knife being just under $38 US. So if you're looking for a knife like this, not a bad price. Feels decent in hand. It has a good look to it. So many different color options. There you go. It's not something I would unrecommend or disrecommend. What's the word for it? But I don't super highly recommend it either. This knife has got a soft recommendation on it. If you really like the styling, it might be a knife that'll work for you. I still like Stedemon knives, and I'm going to keep checking out their products. But this one was just a tiny bit of a downer in some ways for me. But I still enjoy carrying it. I enjoy almost every knife, though, so there's that. Patreon supporters. Patreon's got a technical glitch going on right now for taking out their payments. So if you've noticed on your credit card statement, or if you log into your credit card, that Patreon has not taken your money yet, just wait. They're going to be processing that very soon. Once they've processed all the payments, then I'll do a draw for who's going to be the winner of the knife for January. Because every month, there's not every month, but most months there's at least one card that gets declined, and I wouldn't want that person to be the winner, if they've stopped wanting to support the channel for whatever reason. So I wait until it's all processed before I do that random draw for the winner of my Patreon supporters. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can support my channel through Patreon. It's a support that really does help this channel move forward and keep growing and developing. Because I do have a very limited income. I live on a disability pension. I won't go on about that. This is my hobby that I like to do that keeps me sane, and it's an expensive hobby. So for you guys, if you'd like to support me, go to patreon.com/CCE. Everybody who donates $2 US per month or more, their name gets put in a draw every month to win one of the knives that I reviewed the previous month. And it's not of the cheapest knives, it's of the better knives that I reviewed the previous month. And the winner gets to choose from a selection of at least 5, usually more knives at the end of the month. So thanks again. Remember, guys, always cut towards your chum, not your thumb.